Hi ladies, today we learned a new stitch. It was called the single crochet spike stitch. It came out of the book that I have here on display now, 63 more easy to crochet pattern stitches combined to make an heirloom Afghan. So basically this book is a collection of 63 different types of ways to do stitches. And if you work through each of these patterns, at the end you can sew them together to make a great Afghan. This is a great way to learn crochet because you get exposed to many different techniques. There are some beginning crochet stitches and there are also some more advanced techniques as well. So what we did today was something that was great for beginners. You only use the single crochet stitch, and then there's a variation to the single crochet called the spike. So we'll go over that pattern today. It looks like this in the end. This one right here. And so the spike is what you see coming down across the stitches, and it gives a little bit of extra pattern, a little bit of extra texture to the single crochet stitch itself. Okay, so here is the pattern. And another great thing about this is as we go through this book, you'll learn how to read the patterns itself and how to interpret what it means, and so that you can pick up any book that you like and read the pattern and be able to do the work. Alright, so this again is called the single crochet spikes. It says that we're going to be doing it in multiples of 4. So if you want to make a blanket out of one particular pattern, you can. You don't have to make a bunch of squares and sew them together. You can actually take one pattern that you really love and make it large enough to make a blanket just in that one stitch. And so if you're going to do that, you just pay attention to how many multiples you need to start with. You could also do the same thing with a scarf. So if you like to make a scarf or any flat work, basically, if you want to make a kitchen towel or a placemat or a pot holder, the same thing applies. You just make it however big you want to make it, make sure it's a multiple of 4, and then you'll be able to accomplish this pattern. And that goes for every pattern that is in this book. You just look at the beginning to see what the multiple is, and you can make whatever flat item you want out of it. Again, that's blankets, scarves, pot holders, dish towels, rags, placemats, anything you could think of that is flat. You'll be able to use these patterns to make that type of item. Alright, so to get started, it says to chain 28 loosely, and it stresses the term loosely here. So not too loose that you can't tell the difference between one side of the chain to another, but it's got to be loose enough that you're going to be able to get your hook into the chain itself. Alright, so go ahead and start with your slip stitch. If you don't remember how to do a slip stitch, I have that video that I sent you guys from the last meeting, so go ahead and do that. Same thing with the chain. If you don't remember how to do the chain, go ahead and review that video. And we're going to start out with 28 chains because we're going to make it just like the book says. For this particular book, at the beginning it mentions the gauge. The gauge is not that important, except that if you're going to do a bunch of squares together, they have to be about the same size. And so in that event you would want to measure them. Theoretically this should be about 7 inches if you're working this square as is. Okay, so go ahead and do 28 chains. Make sure we have the right amount. Okay, I have 28. So I've done my chain 28 loosely, and now we begin with row 1. So with row 1, we're going to single crochet and the second chain from the hook. And if you remember from what I was saying before, the reason why we do the second chain from the hook instead of the first one, there's 2 reasons. One, it's easier than trying to go into that first one. It'll be hard to go into that. But also that first chain there offers the height of the single crochet. So if we were doing a larger stitch, we would actually skip a few more to add the height for the stitch. So this is my first chain from the hook, that first V. We don't count the loop that's on the hook. That's just the loop. That's not a chain yet. Here's my second chain from the hook. So I'm going to place my hook up underneath that top loop. And just as a reminder, it's easier to hold the V side towards you and then to go under just that one loop on the top. So if you hold it like this, the loops are on the top. So after you've placed your hook under the loop, yarn over, pull through, and pull up. Don't pull all the way through. If you were to pull all the way through and just have one loop on the hook, that's called a slip stitch. So you're just going to pull through, and you should have 2 loops on the hook, and then yarn over, pull through again, and that's a single crochet. Alright, so do that again in the next stitch. This is the stitch that I just went in. That's why it looks like it has a little bit of a hole. As I continue to go across, that hole won't be noticeable. This is my second chain. So I'm going to go through there, yarn over, pull through, have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through those 2 loops. That's my second single crochet. My next chain is here. So doing the same thing, putting my hook under the loop, yarn over, pull through, have 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through both loops. That's my third single crochet. And you're going to continue in that manner all the way across. So in every single chain, you should have a single crochet once you're finished. Okay, once we get to the end, it curls up a little bit. That curl will go away as we keep working further rows. Once you get to the end, you should count and make sure that you have the correct number of stitches. It should be 27 single crochets if you have done the 28 loosely. If you've done another amount of chains, it should just basically be 1 less than the amount of chains that you have, because we skipped that first chain, and there should be 1 single crochet in every single chain after that. So to be able to count the stitches, see if I could focus the camera here. There we go, that's better. Okay, so you see these V's up at the top? These are the loops that we normally go under, right? So that every single one of these is a stitch. So that's what you're going to be counting. And on the ends, the same thing. So it starts here, and I go all the way across, and it ends here. I'll move my loop out of the way, you can see that whole thing. Okay, so go ahead and count it and make sure you have the right number. Okay, I have 27, so we're good. Alright, so I have finished what it has told me in row 1. On row 2 is going to be the right side. Whenever you see the right side in a pattern, basically it's saying this side is the pretty side and the other side is the not necessarily ugly but less attractive side than the right side. So once we turn, we would mark row 2 as the right side. And it says to chain 1 and then turn. So again, turning is just flipping the work over so that we can start over again. So if you're right-handed, you work right to left. If you're left-handed, you work left to right, and you're always working the same direction in crochet. So when you're doing rows, you keep turning the work and you go back and forth. Last week when we were doing rounds, we didn't do any turning because we were going around and around in a circle. So that's a little bit different. Once you turn, it says to single crochet in each single crochet across. So every single crochet, that's each of these V's that I have here. And you'll also notice that there is a tiny post. It's a short post, but it's there. A post is basically the stitch that makes the height of it. It has a note here that says to loop a short piece of yarn around any stitch to mark the last row as the right side. So the last row being row 2. You would basically, anywhere on this side, you can place a contrasting yarn. And this indicates to us, once we're done, this is the right side. This is going to be the more attractive side of your work. Now, what I do is, I don't use a contrasting yarn. I just make a mental note of which way my tail is. Because when I'm on the odd side, when I'm on this side, my tail is on the left. When I'm on the even side, like when I'm doing even rows, my tail is on the right. So I know that when my work is turned this way and I have my tail on the right, that's going to be my right side in this particular pattern. Okay, so when you're doing the next row and you go to do a single crochet, be careful not to try to single crochet into your chain. Remember, we did a chain and then we turned. So this first loop right here, that's your chain. That is not your first single crochet. You want to make sure that you're going actually into the single crochet stitch. And you'll know because there's a post right there. Alright, and then we're going to single crochet all the way across. And if you're looking at it from the side, a little closer. You're basically going to be putting the hook right here. So if you're looking at it from the side, this is what it looks like. And it's going to go into each one of these. If you're looking at it from the top, you're going under 2 loops here. And then under the 2 loops here. It's technically one loop that wraps around that section, but it's referred to as 2 loops because it's easier to distinguish that way, the V looking pattern. Okay. When you're doing your single crochet, if you actually look at what it's doing, so you're putting your hook under that loop, both loops, yarning over and pulling through, and you end up with your 2 loops on the hook, right? Well, the loop on the right ends up being the loop that is on the top here, so that's what we're seeing. So all of these loops that end up on the top, this was the loop that's on the right, on the right side of the hook now. and then what's on the left ends up being part of that height. It's going to basically wrap around this string that we're doing, and so you kind of get, you can kind of see this loop right here, these two strands that has wrapped around this when I pulled it through. And so if you know what your stitches are doing, it's easier to tell where they are when you're trying to count them, if you know what they look like. So if I look at an individual single crochet, this is what it looks like here from the front anyway. It looks a little bit different from the back. From the back, you have it wrapped around the top. So it kind of looks like two legs and a butt. Alright, and then so for row 2, you're going to single crochet all the way across. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we've noticed before I even get to the end of this, rows 2, 3, 4, and 5 are actually all the same. You chain 1, turn, and you single crochet all the way across. So it's going to be repetitive for a little bit. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to do all those rows. At the end, you should have 5 rows of single crochet that looks just like this. Okay, sometimes if you lose count on which row that you're on, what you can do is you can stretch the stitches, because single crochet is a little bit hard to tell where one ends and another row begins because it's so tight together. Other stitches is a little bit easier, but single crochet is so tight that it's hard to tell where one row ends and another begins. On here you could almost see 3 kind of chunks. So you have this, and then you have a line, and then you have this section and a line, and this section. This is actually 5 rows. Well, the dip that we're seeing here is the back of one of the rows. And so if we stretch it apart, you get to see it a little bit better. So, for example, where these little holes are, how well you can see. Let's see if we can bring it up some. Okay. So as I stretch it, you can see this is one row. These holes that are right here, this is the stitches where I joined them. So this is one row, and if I stretch a little bit more, here's my another row right here, so that's 2. And then I have some holes in between. Here's my, and here's 3, and then some holes in between. This is 4, and then I have some holes in between, and then this is my last one. This little edge right here, that's my foundation. These are my chains that I did at the beginning. Okay, and so that's how I know I'm on row 5, or I have 5 rows. So if you lose count, you can stretch them and count the stitches a little bit. And if you look at the back side, sometimes it's easy to tell from this as well, just because of how it has the bumps. So that will be 2 together. Yeah, so you have this side, sorry, where you have the dips. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then the dips are 4, 5. So if that helps, that's another way you can count. That is only really can tell from the back side, not the right side. Okay, so now we get to begin the fun stitch. This is row 6 is where we begin our spike. It's referred to also as the long single crochet. Is another way that they refer to it. And so we start with the chain 1 and we turn, so that's just like the other rows. We're going to single crochet in the first 3 single crochets, so that just basically means we do 1 single crochet in the first 3, so we'll do 1, 2, 3. I'll actually be from over here. Let me turn my work over. It'll be in these 3. And then we're going to work a long single crochet in 3 rows below. So if you're looking at the diagram here, see how in the picture, if you're going, this is the top row, this is the one row below it, and that's the row below it, and then this is the 3rd row below that. And so instead of going up under the top loop like we've been doing, what you're going to do is you're going to count 3 rows down. So 1, 2, 3. And then you'll stick your hook into the 3rd row down, yarn over and pull through, and you'll bring it up to the height of the work. And that's where you get the long single crochet from, also known as a spike. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that now so I can show you what that looks like. I've already chained and I've already turned. Okay, so I first do 3 single crochets. That's 1, 2, 3 single crochets. Okay, and so I would normally go next under this blue stitch, and that would be my next single crochet, but we're going to be doing a spike. So that's 1 row, this will be the 2nd row, and this is my 3rd row down. So I'm going to stick the hook through my work there, yarn over and pull through here, and come all the way up. You want to make sure that it's about even with your stitch here, because you know, if it's too loose, you're going to have, it's going to kind of look like that. It'll be really loose and it will snag. If it's too tight, it will cause your work to bunch up. So you want to kind of straighten out your work and get it to be about the same height as your current stitch. And then you're just going to yarn over and pull through just like you would with a regular single crochet. You're just coming down here instead of coming up here, and so that's how you get that elongated look. Now there was that blue stitch that I would have gone into if I were working it regularly, but this takes the place of that, so I'm not going to work anything into this stitch because this long single crochet takes the place of that. We're going to have the same number of stitches across, so every row that I finish I should have 27 single crochets, and if I haven't, then I've done something wrong. Alright, and so I'm going to go into the next stitch, and it says to, after you work your long single crochet and 3 rows below, you're going to skip behind the long single crochet. So that's what I was talking about, that blue stitch that I had. We're going to skip that, and this is now and throughout. So every time we do a spike, we don't work that stitch that is on the upper row behind the spike. And then after that, we do single crochet in the next 3 single crochets. So this will be 1. This will be 2, and then 3, and then it says repeat from star. And so when you get to this in a pattern, it might be a star, it could be an asterisk, it could be a parentheses. It depends on the writer, how they like to style it. But they all mean the same thing. They basically are telling you this is the section that you want to repeat, this is the pattern, so this is what you do over and over again. Sometimes they say repeat this 3 times or repeat this 6 times. It'll tell you how many that you need to do. So in that case, you want to keep count. In this particular pattern, it says all the way across. And so this is why it is the multiple of 4 in this pattern, because you have 3 single crochets and then a spike, 3 single crochets and a spike. and that is where we get the 4 from. All right, if you have done starting with 28 loosely chain 28 loosely at the beginning, by the time you get done with row 6, you should have 6 long single crochets or 6 spikes on that row. So go ahead and try that now. And remember, you're going to repeat the same thing. Spike, 3 single crochets. And make sure you're taking a note of which one not to work into. Sometimes it helps to put your finger over the next stitch if you need to mentally say, I'm going into that one next. You should be able to end the row with 3 single crochets. And so if you don't have 3 single crochets on the end, or if you don't have 6 spikes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you might want to go back and redo the row and find out what part you went wrong with. So most likely, if you don't have the correct count, most likely you ended up working one of the stitches behind the spike. It's very easy to do, so be careful of that and watch out for that error. Alright, so that is row 6. Rows 7 through 9 are basically the same as 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to chain 1 turn and single crochet in each single crochet across. You can go ahead and pause the video now and work those rows. I have done that here already. So this is what it looks like at this point. This is row 6 with the spikes, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now I'm on row 10. Row 10 is very similar to row 6. The difference between 10 and 6 is after we chain 1 and turn, row 6 had us do single crochet in the first 3 stitches. Row 10 has us just do single crochet in the first stitch, and then we begin the pattern. And the reason for that is so that you have alternating spikes. So as I do row 10, I'm going to be coming down here, and then here, and then here, all the way in that same pattern all the way across so that they alternate. The great thing about this is once you have that first row of spikes done, it's easy to tell how far you need to come down, because you're going to be coming down on this same row. So wherever this starts, that's where your bottom one should be for row 10 as you're coming down. So you don't really have to count anymore because you've already done the counting. Now you just have to visually guide it into that same spot. And it's going to be in the middle, so it'll be easier to identify where to put those. Okay, so even without counting right now, I could already see where my needle or where my hook is going to go into each of these stitches when I do the spikes. Alright. I have not done my chain 1 or turn yet, so I'm going to go ahead and do chain 1 and then turn. If it's easier, you can actually turn the work first and then chain. So if it's confusing to you on where to do your single crochet, sometimes it's easier to turn your work first and then chain, and that way you already have a visual on where your first stitch is. Okay, so I've done the single crochet in the first single crochet, and it says work the long single crochet in 3 rows below. I know that's going to be here because it's going to line up with the top. Single crochet in the next 3 single crochets, and then work the long single crochet in the row below. We'll repeat star to star, so you see this is the same pattern as before. It's just going to be a little bit staggered. Okay, we're going to do that all the way across. Once we finish with row 10, you're going to end up with 7 spikes. Okay, so I'm going to skip this one that's behind the long single crochet and then do 3. Okay, I'm going to come down 3 from here. It should line up with that, with the top row of the others, or the top of the other spikes. Skip the one that's behind and do 3 single crochets. Okay, right here, we'll go to that row, pull up. According to this pattern, we should have, after you've done it across, you're going to single crochet and the last single crochet. And so once we have done that last spike, you only have 1 single crochet left. And so if your pattern didn't work out like that, you want to look and see what happened. It looks best if we can get the spikes so that they're not twisted. So if you can control that while you're doing them, that'd be great, but if you need to, you can come back and try to adjust it. Okay, so remember when we started, we said that the tail being on the right means that this side is the right side, so this is the side that they're considering the more attractive side for this pattern. Not that the other side is ugly, because it's still nice. But you can see how the spike stitch on this side has a broader range and more, it looks like V's. So on this side it looks like lines or stripes, whereas this one it's a little bit more spread at the top. So to me it's really a matter of opinion which one looks better, but the writer defined row 2 as the right side, so that would be this one right here. There are a lot of different things that you can do with spikes. This particular one just has one spike and it alternates, and so that's one way to do it. I've also have this one is very popular, where they've used spikes to kind of make a faux ripple effect. So if we look at the bottom, it's actually squared off, but it has alternating heights for the spikes. This is the wrong side on this one, this is the right side. So you can see the spikes better here. So in this particular pattern, we went down one row, this went 2 rows, 3 rows, 2 rows, 1 row, level. 1 row, 2 row, 3 rows, 2 rows, 1 row, level. And it was like that all the way across. And so it takes 5 spikes, and there's 1 regular single crochet in between. So this number of stitches, that was 5, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So it started out with 20 chains because you got to have 1 for the height. And then we did 3 rows of single crochet, and then we started the spike pattern over again so that it lines up. But in this particular case, I did contrasting colors, and so that's how you get the ripple effect. It's like a faux ripple effect, no matter which side we're looking at. This side, the wrong side in this particular case, you can see the ripple effect a little bit better. Okay, so that's all that we covered today. We'll have more for you next time. If there's anything in particular that you want to learn, be sure to email me or text me, and I'll put it on our schedule. See you next week or next meeting. Bye.